Hello Exiles, it's Dosi here, bringing you a crafting guide on how to craft an endgame one-handed caster weapon. Of course, this video is going to focus a little bit on the build that I released recently, which is the self-cast EK Hierophant, but I'm going to try to stay as generic as possible so that this video will be useful to anyone who watches it. Before we start, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who watched my previous video, the EK build guide. The reception has been fantastic and the feedback as well. You guys have really motivated me to make videos on a regular basis, so yeah, let's get started. In this video, I'm going to go through and I'm going to teach you 5 different methods of crafting a caster weapon. I've ranked them from D tier all the way to S plus tier while skipping C tier because I really do think there's a gap between the D tier weapon and the B tier weapon. So the first method we're going to go through is quite literally a vendor recipe. It's extremely cheap, anybody can do it, even if you're on SSF or if you're a total beginner. And if you're a total beginner, you might be able to make a little bit of currency if you craft and sell these items early league. Small tip there. So first you need to pick a base, that's up to you what base you want to choose. I go through some of the bases at the end of the video. So yeah, pick a base, then you need to have at least 2 skill gems which total 40% quality and that each have the tag that you're interested in. So if you want +1 to level of all physical spell skill gems, the gems need to have the physical tag. If you're interested in +1 to fire spells, then the gems need to have the fire tag, etc. Then you sell everything to a vendor and you will get a magic item with +1 to the chosen elements. Afterwards you just use an orb of augmentation to give it a suffix, and you regal orb to give it another mod, and finally you can benchcraft anything you want. If you're lucky, you might get some good mods aside from the +1. If not, you'll have the +1 and the crafted modifier. The B tier weapon is going to be more expensive than the D tier weapon, but the goal here is to make a decent enough weapon to carry you throughout red maps. So the first thing you need to do is find or buy a fractured caster weapon and then apply a regal orb to it. Don't buy something too expensive, the goal here is to stay within a budget. So for example, crit strike chance for spells as a fracture is very cheap. Then the crafting process is very simple. You're going to spam essences until you hit the +1 you're looking for. So either you're very lucky, but it's quite rare, and you hit +1 to all spell skill gems, or you get +1 physical if you're playing a physical spell, or fire, cold, whatever. So Craft of Exile predicts an average of 400 tries for anything that isn't +1 to all spell skill gems, so physical, fire, cold, whatever. My recommendation here is not to go for deafening essences. Those can be quite expensive and you're better off making a higher tier weapon if you're going for deafening essences. Shrieking essences of woe, for example, cost 2C a piece if you buy them in bulk, so 400 shrieking essences represents 800 C, that's about 3 or 4 divs, and that's going to be the total cost of the craft. Something you can do to make the crafting process a little bit less tedious is to put your wand or your weapon in your stash and then type in +1 to level. This way it will highlight whenever you get a +1 to level. You can even sell something if you get a result that you're not looking for. For example, if you get a +1 to level of all lightning spell skill gems, you might be able to sell it for a little bit of profit and then restart. That's a good way of keeping the cost quite low. Finally, once you hit a +1 that you're looking for, you just need to go to the crafting bench and craft something that's good for your build. You can also slam an exalt if you're feeling lucky. The A tier weapon is once again in a whole different league compared to the previous two. This time we're going to get +2 to our desired skill gems, a good fractured mod, a good veiled mod, and a good crafted mod. So the first thing you need to do is find or buy a good fractured caster weapon. So for EK Hierophant, I recommend either crit multi or cast speed. But depending on your build, you may want something else, maybe damage over time, maybe spell damage. It really depends on your build. Then you have 2 options. The first one is the one that I use to craft my weapon, and honestly in hindsight I would never do it again. So you want to spam Orbs of Alteration until you hit +1 to level of all spell skill gems, and then use a Regal Orb. So this is a huge pain. Craft of Exile predicts an average of 3,216 tries if you only use alts. If you use alts plus augments, it's a little bit more than half of that, but that's really a huge pain. One thing you can do to make it a little bit less tedious is to put your weapon in your stash and type in +1 to level. This way, the game will highlight your weapon if you get a good mod. But honestly, I'd recommend going for the second method, which is using fossils. If your base is a wand, you want corroded, jagged, metallic, and shuddering fossils. Craft of Exile predicts an average of 2 tries to hit +1 all. If you're using scepters or rune daggers, you want etheric, corroded, metallic, and shuddering. Craft of Exile predicts 3 tries for scepters and 5 tries for rune daggers, so no matter what your base is, it will always be better than alteration orbs. You do, however, need an open prefix and an open suffix, so if you don't, you will need to use an orb of annulment, or maybe 2. In my example, the % increased cast speed is extremely lucky. I just wanted to keep it because sometimes you have good RNG. Don't count on it when you're making the weapon. Now that you have your base with +1 to all spell skill gems, you want to benchcraft cannot roll attack modifiers, and then go to the Hoarded Crafting Station and add remove physical. This way you will guarantee +1 to level of all physical spell skill gems. The only problem is that you have a risk of removing the +1 to level of all spell skill gems, and in that case you need to restart at step 2 and spam alterations or fossils to get the +1 all, etc. Okay, once you have your +1 to level of all spell and +1 to level of all physical spell skill gems, you want to benchcraft prefixes cannot be changed, and either use Veiled Chaos Orb, but you risk breaking the item by filling all the suffixes, or go for Iceling T4 to add a Veiled modifier. So at this point, something really interesting happens, and this thing is the reason why I usually go for this craft when making a caster weapon. Once you get your Veiled modifier, you have 2 possible outcomes. Either you get a Veiled suffix, or you get a Veiled prefix. If you get a Veiled suffix, you can continue on and make your A-tier caster weapon, which will be extremely good and sufficient to kill all the content in the game. But if you get a Veiled prefix, you actually have a chance to make the S+ tier item. To make the S+ tier item, you want to unveil any % increased spell damage prefix. The best for EK Hierophant being % increased spell damage, gain 5% of non-chaos damage as extra chaos damage. But you cannot block any mods since your prefixes will be full. That means that there are 2% increased spell damage mods, which each have a weighting of 1k out of a total 24k, so that means you have around 14% chance to get one of the 2. My math may be off, but I think it's around that percentage. Arguably, you could also get % cold damage or something else specific or related to your build, but it's a little bit less good, in my opinion. However, if you get the % increased spell damage mod, congratulations, you're almost there. You've almost made the S+ tier item, and you've passed the most expensive and most tedious part. Well done. But let's get back to the A tier weapon, and let's just say that you hit a Veiled suffix. Before unveiling the suffix, you want to benchcraft something that you don't want and that has a high weighting, like strength, dexterity, and accuracy rating. Then you're going to unveil a mod that's good for your build. So for self-cast DK, that would be Crit Strike Multi while a rare, unique, or enemy is nearby. If you're not satisfied with your Veiled mod, you can always pick an attack modifier. Benchcraft cannot roll caster modifiers, and use Orbs of Annulment until you remove the Veiled modifier and restart at step 5. Finally, once you get something good, benchcraft something that's good for your build. So cast speed, crit multi, crit chance, something like that. On screen, you can see a little recap, a little summary of what you have to do to make the A tier weapon, because this one was a little bit long. The S tier weapon is an absolute bomb of a weapon, and if you craft it, you will absolutely obliterate content. However, there are a lot of steps involved in the crafting process, and it's quite expensive to make. The good side is that there aren't too many steps with RNG involved. The first thing you need to do is find a fractured base with +1 to level of all spell skill gems. That's probably going to cost a lot of currency, maybe more than the total cost of the A tier weapon. At that point, you're going to use Deafening Essences of Woe until you have 1 open prefix and 1 open suffix. At that point, Benchcraft cannot roll attack modifiers and go to the Hoardy crafting station to add remove physical. That will force +1 to level of all physical spell skill gems. Once you've done that, go back to the bench and craft Prefixes cannot be changed, then go back to the Hoardy crafting station and Reforge Caster until you hit something good. Now what do I call something good? I would call tier 2 or tier 1 crit strike chance for spells or cast speed, but it may be something different for your build. If you aren't satisfied with your mod, you can always go back to step 5. However, I wouldn't worry about it too much because afterwards there's a little bit of RNG and you might remove the mod completely. So once you're satisfied with your mod, go back to the crafting bench and craft Prefixes cannot be changed, and then go for Iceling T4 to add a veiled suffix. So you have a 50-50% chance to remove the caster modifier. That's why I said to not worry too much. Before unveiling the veiled mod, you want to go to the crafting bench and craft a mod that you don't want for your build that has a high weighting. So for EK Hierophant, that would be any damage over time modifier. At that point, you want to unveil something good for your build. So as usual, what's good for your build? The best thing for EK Hierophant would be crit multi, but double damage can be good. Some other mods can be good as well. Finally, you want to benchcraft something that's good for your build. For self-cast EK, that would be cast speed, crit strike chance for spells, crit multi, depending on what you hit before. And then you're done. Well done! The S+ tier weapon is going to be the final craft of this video. It's also going to be a bit shorter than the S and A tier weapon because it's actually a variation of the A tier weapon. So we've been through the first steps of the A tier weapon together. If you need to see them again, they will be shown on screen. But the important part is that at step 6, you need to add a veiled modifier. If you add a prefix and you manage to unveil any spell damage mod, then you're good to go for the S+ tier weapon. If you didn't hit it and you want to force it, then you can unveil any mod that does not have the caster tag, Benchcraft cannot roll caster modifiers, and use Orb of Annulments until you remove the desired mod. Once you actually get the spell damage prefix, you want to go to the bench and craft Prefixes cannot be changed. Then go to the Hoardy crafting station and Reforge Caster until you hit something good. Now what's something good? Something good is tier 2 or tier 1 cast speed. It's tier 2 or tier 1 crit strike chance for spells. The best being cast speed in my opinion, but maybe your build doesn't care about cast speed. Once you've got that, you go to the bench and finally benchcraft something that's good for your build. So for self-cast EK, that would be cast speed, crit strike chance for spells, or crit strike multi while a rare unique enemy is nearby. And there you go, you have an absolute beast of a weapon that can obliterate anything in the game very easily. Before finishing and wrapping up the video, I wanted to go through which bases are good for crafting caster weapons. We're going to take a look at wands, scepters, and rune daggers because these are the 3 main types for caster weapons. You can have some type of foil shenanigans, but I'm honestly not interested in them. And if you're at the level where you're going to craft with them, you probably do not need this video. So first, you have the common base, or the regular base, which are items that you can literally pick off the ground pretty much anywhere. So for wands, you're going to want high % increased spell damage or high % increased cast speed implicits, the best being profane or prophecy wands. For scepters, you're going to want high % increased elemental damage or high damage penetrates % elemental resistance implicits. the best of those being Sandbar, Void, and Opal Scepters. Finally, for Rune Daggers, you're going to want high % increased critical strike chance implicits, the best being all the Chris's, the Golden, Copper, and Platinum Chris's. Do take note that these are the absolute best bases, but sometimes if it saves you tens of divines, maybe it's better to choose something that has, I don't know, 3% less increased spell damage? Yeah, I'll take the trade-off. Okay, so after you have Heist Bases. So these bases are very situational, and I would not recommend using them unless you know what you're doing. Some builds love them, some builds hate them. Do note that they do not drop fractured, so a fractured Heist Base will be very expensive because it means that either you or another player has fractured it with a fracturing orb. So Heist Wands generate charges every 6 seconds. These can be pretty good quality of life and can be quite great if you have high charge duration on your build. So maybe if you're playing Trickster or something like that. Heist Scepters grant you a specific keystone modifier, so Secrets of Suffering and Elemental Equilibrium. These are extremely powerful and game-breaking for some builds, and build-breaking and game-breaking but in the wrong way for some others. Finally, Heist Rune Daggers trigger Flame Dash when you use a socketed skill. I've honestly never seen someone use this, but I may be wrong. If you know a build that uses this, please let me know. I'm very curious. Finally, we have Synthesized Bases. So Synthesized Bases are a little bit different than the rest because it doesn't matter what your base item is, if it's a wand, a dagger, or a scepter. Basically, all these items have pretty much the same mod pool. Few differences, but pretty much the same mod pool. And the mod pool is huge, and most of these implicits are pretty much useless, so 16% increased mana regeneration rate is worthless. No one wants that instead of 30 or 40% increased spell damage. However, you have some rare implicits that are extremely powerful and extremely sought after. The other thing to note is that synthesized implicit cannot be fractured, even with a fracturing orb. So, most crafting methods will be much more tedious. For example, you will not be able to use my A tier crafting method, nor my S tier, nor my S plus tier crafting method. Some of the most powerful synthesized implicits include the stat stacking ones, so spell damage per 16 strength, dex, intelligence, the chance to explode, and the chance to deal double damage. While making the final edits on the video, I realized that I forgot something extremely important. So whatever you're crafting in Path of Exile, especially if you're a new player, but I think it's true for anyone, whatever you're crafting, please practice on Craft of Exile. Yeah, Craft of Exile is free, you can practice as much as you want, you can learn crafting there, and it's the best way to prevent mistakes and to prevent wasting currency. Additionally, you can also go on PoEDB to find out the weightings of various mods and which mods are available for your specific base. If you made it to the end of this video, first of all, thank you. And secondly, let me know. Leave a like, leave a comment, give me some feedback. I'm still very new to this whole content creation thing. So let me know what I did right, let me know what I did wrong. I read every single comment and I'm very curious and interested in how I can make things better, more interesting, more detailed. Also, let me know if you would like more guides on what you would like guides. Yeah, let me know. And to finish this video, I thought that nothing could be better than to showcase one of the methods, but unfortunately everything that could go wrong went wrong and I ran out of currency, so I shrinked it, accelerated it, and left it for the end of the video. So you can see it as a blooper or a funny video at the end. Enjoy!